Let's talk some chess. We're in the midst of the 2023 Chess World Cup, which is essentially the tournament that decides who gets to play in the Candidates Tournament later this year. The Candidates Tournament is a three-player tournament where they play amongst themselves, and the winner of that has the opportunity to face Ding Liren, the World Chess Champion, in next year's World Chess Championship. So a little bit confusing, but essentially think of this Chess World Cup as an opportunity to play for the opportunity to play in the World Championship, if that makes any sense at all. Yesterday we had an amazing match. Hikaru Nakamura, who we all know, playing with white pieces against Prague, which is the nickname of an Indian GM, Super GM, who just turned 18, I think the day of the match or the day before. So very, very strong up-and-coming player. And this was a crazy sort of matchup. Hikaru is the second highest rated player in the field after, of course, Magnus Carlsen. So he's the heavy favorite coming into this game, but of course Prague is very, very strong and going to be a tough out in any tournament. The format's kind of interesting. So the first two games that the players play are classical. They have a ton of time. And if the score is tied after two games, which it was in this case, both of the first two games were drawn, then they play two more games. One player each gets an opportunity with the white pieces with 25 minutes per side. 25 minutes plus a 10-second increment. So every move you make, you get 10 more seconds. So they played two games like that, and then if the score is tied, they take the time down even more, et cetera, et cetera. So this is in the third game of the match, the first 25-minute game. Hikaru's playing with the white pieces. I know that was sort of a long run-up, but I think it's worth it to sort of set the stakes and understand the groundwork before kicking off this game. The last thing I'll say, I know this is a long intro, so sorry. The last thing I'll say is that Hikaru, right after the game, made an awesome recap video, analysis video of the game. Obviously, he's an amazing player and just explainer of the game, teacher of the game. So definitely worth checking that out. I'll link it below. Okay, I think that's everything. Hikaru opens us up with c4. We have knight to f6 by Prague, knight to c3 and e5, and now knight to f3, attacking this pawn on e5. Prague defends it with knight to c6, adding a defender, and now g3, potentially preparing to fianchetto the light-squared bishop. We have bishop to b4 by Prague, attacking this knight on c3, and now the first indication that this is going to be a bit of a strange game, Hikaru plays knight to d5. An aggressive move, getting the knight already to the 5th rank, forking the bishop and the knight. Both are, of course, defended by the queen and the knight, respectively, but an aggressive move here from Hikaru. And Prague ignores it for the moment and plays e4, wants to kick this knight away from f3, and here Hikaru doesn't have many good squares to put this knight. These two squares are covered by the knight on c6. You obviously don't want to retreat the knight to g1 because then you lose your progress. And even this g5 move, I didn't look at this line, but g6 just kicks the knight away. So instead, Hikaru moves the knight to h4, and already we have some pretty interesting positioning for these two knights. One on the 5th rank, one on the h file, and Hikaru will have to be careful sort of as the game continues. We have kingside castle by Prague, bishop to g2, fianchettoing and attacking this pawn on e4, although it is defended by the knight on f6, and now d6 by Prague, opening up a lane for this light-squared bishop. Hikaru castles kingside, and now this is one of those games where all the action sort of happens at the beginning. A lot of games we play for a long time, and then at the end, a big move happens, but here it happens right away. So take a second and see if you can find Prague's next move while I give you a moment or two. Okay, so hopefully you've noticed that this knight on h4 has... Oh, sorry, that's not what I want to do. This knight on h4 has run out of good squares to land on. g7, of course, is taken by the pawns. f5 is taken by the bishop on c8. f3 is taken by the pawn. And now, since Hikaru fianchetted his bishop, g2 is taken away as well. So this knight has basically no squares they can safely move to, and Prague takes advantage of that with a very aggressive g5 move. And this is aggressive because you're moving your most important defensive pawn, the pawn that's sitting in front of the king, but obviously you're attacking this knight, which has nowhere to go. And Hikaru in the video kind of lamented getting to this point. There's another line he talks about earlier where he castles a little bit earlier, or castles a little bit later, castles at a different time, and doesn't get to this point. But there is a move here that saves Hikaru, and the idea is that you're going to lose this knight, but if you can generate enough counterplay to make it worth it, then white can sort of survive here with a strong positional or material advantage. So see if you can find that move while I give you a couple of seconds. Okay, it's a very, very hard move to find. So if you found it, awesome, awesome job. The move is d4. Oh, God, that is not the move. Sorry. The move is d4. And this is a This is a crazy looking move in this position. It ignores the knight, but what it achieves is that it opens up a path for the dark squared bishop to develop. So after here, Prague can't take the knight. You actually force here. I forget what the correct move here is for Prague, but it's not. Is it just? Yeah, it's just okay. So we'll talk about that in a moment. If you take the knight here, which you can't, we'll see why. Bishop to g5 is played by Hikaru, and now all of a sudden this knight, Hikaru's just given up a knight on h4, but this knight is going to fall because this knight is pinned by the bishop to the queen on d8, and it's attacked twice by the knight and the bishop. And there's no real way to defend this other than defending it with the king, which doesn't work. You can't defend it with another minor piece or a pawn. So the best continuation here is actually just developing the light squared bishop to d7. And now after bishop captures attacking the queen, you actually have to take the bishop here and give up the queen. So queen takes and knight takes with check, and then the game continues on. The reason you have to take the bishop here is because let's say you try to save the queen and bring the queen to c8, getting it out of harm's way. Then Hikaru actually has checkmate in a couple of moves, and this is crazy. Queen to c1 is played. Looks like a very non-threatening move, but the idea is now you are threatening to get to g5 with check, and after the king moves to h8, then just queen to g7 protected by the bishop will be checkmate. So here there's actually amazingly no way to stop this. You can just give away all your pieces, pawn blocks, bishop kind of blocks, blocks from the rear, queen takes on d2, and then after h6, then queen here, and there's no stopping checkmate on the next move on g7. So pretty crazy line, and definitely difficult to see in a game of this speed, so we can't blame Hikaru for not finding it. The correct move from Prague, the correct move from Prague after d4, because of this threat of bishop takes on g5, which is a terrible threat, is just h6, now adding a defense to this bishop. And now Hikaru actually can maintain his material. Knight takes on b4, knight takes, and now actually doesn't maintain his material, but you'll see the idea. Now f3, pawn takes on h4, and now bishop takes on h6. G4 pushing onwards, not G4, E3, G4, knight to H7, and then the bishop takes the rook on F8. I'm going through this fast because it's just kind of a sideline. That's a good pun. And in this position, the material is much closer to being equal. Hikaru has more pawns. He has a rook for a knight and a bishop. And Prague's king is much less safe, doesn't have any pawns in front of it. So this is a much more even position for the two sides. I feel like the second line didn't make as much sense, but basically the idea is after d4, you protect on h6 and then kind of go from there. Hopefully that made sense. But you have to protect because you've opened up the g file. Okay, I'm just talking in circles now. Long story short, this is a theoretical line. It didn't happen. This d4 move is incredibly hard to find, so we can't blame Hikaru. Instead here, Hikaru played the losing move, unfortunately, which is a3, attacking this bishop on b4. So Prague, of course, retreats it, and now Hikaru plays d3. Similar idea to the d4 move we saw earlier, opening up a lane for the dark square bishop. But Hikaru said in this position, he's like, I could have resigned in this position. He, of course, plays on because this is a huge tournament and a huge moment. But now Prague takes on d5, pawn takes on d5, the knight retreats, pawn takes on e4, and now finally Prague takes on h4. And now Prague is just up material. It's going to be very hard for Hikaru to sort of compensate for that lost knight. He's going to try, of course, and he's a great attacker, and the g-file is open, but it's going to be difficult with such a great player as Prague across the board. So bishop to h6 right away, attacking this rook on f8. Prague moves it, doesn't want to give up the exchange. G takes on h4, and now, Hikaru has opened up the g-file, and hopefully he can get an attack going. But we have queen takes on h4 now, getting the queen on a threatening square and attacking Hikaru's dark squared bishop. Queen to c1, protecting the bishop, and now f6. King to h1, getting ready to bring the rook to g1 and potentially get an attack going. But now knight to d7, and now the pieces are going to start rallying around Prague's king and make it very difficult to achieve a breakthrough. bishop to f4 with ideas of rerouting the bishop to attack the queen on h4, knight to e5. Now this is a very strong defensive knight, and now bishop to g3 attacking the queen. So the queen retreats to h5, and now rook to g1 lining up with the enemy king. And this looks like a good idea, but it's going to be difficult to get these bishops out in time, and this king will actually not have too hard of a time getting to safety. So knight to g6, first of all by Prague, just sealing up the g file. Now there's no sort of discovery from the rook coming because the knight is blocking, and now f4 trying to kick the knight away from g6 and open up the g file. But now bishop to g6, I'm sorry, bishop to b6, attacking Hikaru's rook on g1. Hikaru can't give up any more material, so he plays e3 blocking. But now essentially all this queen is doing on c1 is protecting the pawn on e3, which is blocking the bishop from the rook. But the queen, which is obviously you want to be attacking, is not really achieving much, just defending this e3 pawn. So king to f7, now Prague is like, okay, I'm going to move my king away from all of the heat on the g file and use my piece advantage and be totally fine. We have e5, d takes on e5, f takes on e5, knight takes on e5. The knight now can move away from the g file because the king is no longer on the g file. And now queen to c3, staying in defense of this e3 pawn, so the bishop cannot take it. But getting to a more central square, keeping an eye on this knight. Maybe bishop takes, queen takes is an idea, but the rook is guarding it, so it's not really much of an idea now that I think about it. Bishop to h3, Prague would love to trade bishops and just trade down into an endgame. The queen is protecting the bishop, of course, and Hikaru, for the moment, ignores it and brings the rook a to f1. Now this pawn is pinned to the king, so if the knight is taken, the pawn cannot capture back. But we just have bishop takes, rook takes, and now g4, knight to g4 by Prague. Wonderful little move here, adding a protector to this f6 pawn, which is now protected by the king and the knight. Also, threats of queen takes on h2 with mate. In the future, it's not going to happen right now because the bishop and the rook are defending, but Prague is defending while attacking, which is always a good idea. And you've also opened up a double attack from the bishop and the rook on this really crucial e3 pawn. So d6 by Hikaru doesn't really have much to play here. C takes on d6, queen b to b3 check. So this was the idea, is clearing out this diagonal for the queen to check the king. Queen check, d5 blocking, and the pawn is of course protected by the queen, so we can't take it. Instead, queen to a4, maybe with ideas of getting to d7 with check, but not going to be very effective. Instead, rook to e4, a wonderful rook lift, comes with the tempo on the white queen on a4, so queen back to d1. And now finally bishop to e3. Now this pawn is undefended, and now these four pieces all of a sudden are getting after the attack against Hikaru's king. So Prague went from defending to having just a sort of an almost overwhelming attack against Hikaru's side. A4 by Hikaru doesn't really have many moves here. All of these pieces are doing something either in defense or just this queen technically is pinning the knight on g4 to the enemy queen, so it doesn't want to move. The rooks have to be careful because the knight's controlling all these squares. They also have to keep protecting h2 because the queen and the knight are eyeing it. So Hikaru doesn't really have any moves here, just plays a4. Rook a to e8, doubling up on the e file. Queen to b3, eyeing this b7 pawn with check. It won't matter, but trying to get some counter, and just b6 defends the pawn. Queen to b5, again, maybe queen to d7, bishop to d4 now by Prague, just a waiting move, and in this position, Hikaru resigned the game. He's down a knight, and honestly, it's hard to tell who has a better attack here, and, well, it might not even be that hard to tell. It's probably Prague. He has more pieces coordinated, and this king does not look very safe here, stuck on h1. So, crazy game. I think it just goes to show, if you make one slight move that's not completely precise in the opening, the best players in the world will take advantage and punish you, and that's exactly what happened here. So this was game one. This means that Prague is going into game two with a 1-0 lead, and Hikaru's only hope is to win game two with the black pieces to sort of tie the two games and send it into another overtime. So we'll see if he can do it. I'm going to make another video, so the videos aren't too long. So I'll try to link it to the end screen, which should be coming up in a second. So hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you for game two of this, I guess game four of this excellent match in a moment. So see you then.